Hello and welcome to this session on the licensing of secure productive enterprise. My name's Louise Ulrich and it's my pleasure to take you through these slides. They support the Secure Productive Enterprise licensing module in the accreditations at getlicensingready.com. And if you need reference material, you'll find a very nice supporting handout at that site as well. Here's our agenda for the session, and you can see that we're going to start with that all-important question: what actually is Secure Productive Enterprise? Then we'll take a look at the available licenses for Secure Productive Enterprise, or SPE, as I may refer to it throughout this session, and we'll see when each license type is the right choice for a customer according to their different situations. Then we'll cover some interesting rights that SPE customers are eligible for, some on-premises server rights and some special rights for Office Professional Plus. More on that though towards the end of this session. But let's start with our SPE question. What is it? And as part of this, I'd like to look at why SPE was created. What problems does it solve? Let's take a look at the statistics on this slide and see what trends are affecting businesses today. Now look at the man on the right hand side of the slide. He uses several different devices to work in different situations, and he feels he can be productive if he's able to work in this way. Perhaps he uses his Surface Pro when he travels, but has a different device in his office, and he'll use his Windows phone as he waits to meet a colleague in a coffee shop. If you look at the statistic, you'll see that about a third of us use 3 or more devices to work anywhere. Are you one of those people? I certainly am. So this is what the user wants to do, but let's consider this from a licensing perspective. What products is this man likely to be using? It's probably Windows and Office, isn't it? These have traditionally been licensed per device, so this represents potentially a problem for his business. If the man wants to use lots of devices, they all need to be licensed. Or do they? This is, as you may know, where user licensing comes in, and today his business could buy him user licenses for Windows and Office to facilitate this scenario. Now look at the lady on the left hand side of the screen. She's got her own laptop. It's new and shiny and she loves it, and it's much nicer than the one her IT department have issued her with, and so she uses it at work. And apparently 3/4 of people use their personal devices to access corporate data and applications. Now that's all fine for the user, but let's say the company she works for has an enterprise agreement. This device is likely to start being counted as a qualified device and would need licensing. Now we may buy licenses for this device, since this lady is an important worker, but then she brings in her iPad the next day and tells her friends they can use their own devices. And soon the business is either non-compliant or spending a lot of money on licenses. And again, in this situation, user licensing is the answer. I license the lady for Windows and Office, and then I don't have to worry about the devices she uses. So businesses are giving their users more devices or letting them use their own devices, and user licensing for Windows and Office is great for that. But let's now turn to the IT manager. What does he think when he's told that users will have multiple devices and/or they'll be bringing their own devices to access corporate data and applications? He may start to find his head aching a little bit. And it's exactly this situation that Secure Productive Enterprise was designed for. I want to give my users flexibility, but I need to retain IT security and control. Let's take a look at what's included in Secure Productive Enterprise. So here we have it, and you can see that Secure Productive Enterprise is actually a suite of products comprising Windows 10 Enterprise, Office 365 and Enterprise Mobility Plus Security. Now SPE is a single user subscription license for all of these products, which means that I can buy my users just one license and they have all of these components. They can use Windows on a variety of devices and install Office 365 Pro Plus on up to 5 devices. And what's equally important is that the IT department has the tools in EMS to manage the devices and make sure that there's the necessary infrastructure in place to keep the corporate data and applications secure. Now you can see that there are 2 flavours of SPE, E3 and E5, and it will come as no surprise, I'm sure, that if you buy SPE E3, then you get the E3 versions of the different components, and if you buy SPE E5, then you get the E5 versions. What's the difference? Well, I think you'd imagine that you would have access to more features and functionality in SPE E5, but what? Actually, Secure Productive Enterprise is a great name for this suite because it tells you what you get: security and productivity functionality. SPE E3 gives you access to productivity tools such as Office 365 Pro Plus and Exchange, SharePoint and Skype for Business Online, and security and management tools such as Azure Information Protection and Intune. SPE E5 gives you everything that's in SPE E3 and then more security tools such as Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection or Customer Lockbox, as well as productivity tools like Power BI Pro and PSTN conferencing. Now, some of you may have heard of the Enterprise Cloud Suite, and in fact that was the predecessor to SPE. And today, any customers licensed for the Enterprise Cloud Suite are now automatically licensed for SPE, the E3 version, with all the components you see here and including the special rights that we'll talk about later. There's just a couple of other points to mention. We know that SPE is a suite, and because you're buying the components as a suite, you get about a 5% discount for buying them all together rather than separate Windows, Office 365 and EMS licenses. And finally on this slide, for customers who have an enterprise agreement, this truly usifies the licensing. Now that's the official word, honestly, which means that they no longer have to count and license devices in the EA, they can just license the users. It's time now to look at the licenses that are available for SPE. So far, we know that it's licensed with a user subscription license, sometimes called USLs, but actually there are 3 different types of USLs, which are the right choice for a customer in different situations. My diagram actually shows SPE E3, but in fact everything we'll talk about applies to SPE E5 as well. Let's start over at the right hand side of this slide, and you can see that this represents the SPE full USL, which we know is a single license for all 3 components. This is ideal for a brand new EA or MPSA, that's the Microsoft Products and Services Agreement customer. There are some minimums associated with these programs, so 500 USLs for the EA and 250 for the MPSA, and in fact it's the only SPE license available in the MPSA. However, in the EA there are a couple of other alternatives, an add-on USL and a from SA USL. Let's consider when they're the right choice for a customer. Now look at the grey licenses on the slide. They represent an EA customer's existing licenses, so they've bought Windows, Office and Cal Suite licenses. They're now thinking that SPE will solve some of their business problems. Perhaps they want to start using cloud services and/or they want to usify their licensing. If they perhaps want to try some of the online services like Exchange Online or SharePoint Online, then add-on licenses are ideal. They continue to pay for their Windows, Office and Cal Suite licenses, but then buy add-ons too. Now, they don't have to buy these for every user in their organisation. They could buy them just for a particular team if they wanted to, and at that point, those users have usified licensing and have access to all the associated online services. The customer can add these add-ons on at any time. It doesn't have to be an anniversary or renewal, for example. And if they find that something changes, then they can opt to reduce the number of licenses at anniversary. I like to call this adding off the licenses rather than adding on. Equally, if they love the flexibility these licenses give them, they can continue to renew them at renewal and beyond. But they may feel that the licensing position could be further simplified. Let's consider what they have. They have underlying licenses, and the Windows and Office licenses are device licenses, and the Cal Suite licenses could be user or device licenses, and then they have add-ons, which are all user licenses. They may prefer to move to the single SPE license for their users, and because they've been a loyal SA customer, they're eligible for the From SA USL. You can probably see from the diagram that this is the same functionality as the full USL on the right, but can you see that the bar is a lower height? Now this represents the price. Prices of course are different throughout the world, but take a look here. The add-on and the From SA licensing positions are about the same cost, which are both less than the full USL, and this is because they're aimed at customers who've been loyal EA customers. Now there are some conditions to be eligible for the From SA USL. I've said they're for existing EA customers, but there's another condition. You need to own the underlying licenses. So, for example, you couldn't sign an EA and then go to the From SA USL before the renewal of your agreement after 3 years when you've paid for the licenses. This may lead you to think of what happens for customers who have a subscription EA since they never own their licenses. Well, it's a similar rule actually. If you've paid for the underlying licenses for 3 years, or more of course, then you're eligible to move to From SA USLs. Just a final thing I need to tell you about the From SA USLs, and that's when you can actually purchase them as a customer. In fact, they can only be transacted at anniversary or renewal, unlike the add-ons, which can be used at any time in the agreement. So let's finish this slide by doing a couple of customer scenarios to see if you can work out the right licensing recommendation. Are you ready? Let's start with an EA customer who's licensed for the Enterprise Desktop. So they have Windows, Office and the Enterprise Cal Suite. 25 new users join the company who they want to license for Secure Productive Enterprise. What should they buy? Well, the best recommendation in this case would be full USLs, since they don't have any spare underlying licenses for the new users, so they wouldn't be able to buy the From SA or add-on USLs. What about a customer with an existing platform EA, let's say 500 users and devices, and they want to move 200 of the people to SPE renewal? What would their renewal order look like? Well, can they move just some of their people to SPE? Absolutely they can, and so at renewal they would buy 300 traditional licenses and then 200 From SA SPE USLs. My next one is a customer who has Office 365 E3 and wants to move to SPE. Now, what do they buy? Well, this is easy actually when you know the answer. They just buy the other components of the suite. So in this case, they would buy EMS E3 and Windows 10 Enterprise E3, and they're considered to have the full SPE suite, in fact, with all the benefits that it brings as well. And finally, on this slide, a customer who has SPE E3 and wants to move to SPE E5. There's a further type of USL for this customer, which is a step-up USL. Now, you may well be familiar with step-up licenses for customers who, for example, have SQL Server Standard licenses with SA and want to move to SQL Server Enterprise licenses. It's the same thing here. You continue paying for the SPE E3 licenses and pay for the E5 step-up USLs too, which are just the difference in price between an SPE E3 USL and an SPE E5 USL. It's time now to consider some of the special rights that I've been promising you. Now, the first set of rights are called on-premises server rights, and can you see in the slide title, they apply to all of the USLs we've talked about, so full, add-on and From SA USLs. Have a look at this man here. He works for an organisation who've had traditionally licensed servers on premises. So here they wanted to use SharePoint, so they've bought SharePoint Server and Windows Server licenses and assigned them to their physical server. However, now they have plans to move to online services and they want to start using Exchange, SharePoint and Skype for Business online. So they purchase their users an SPE license, and remember, it can be any type here. Now, does this license entitle our user to access the hosted servers? Of course it does, that's why we bought it. However, can he still access the on-premises servers which are already licensed? Actually he can, and this is important of course. No organisation decides to move to the cloud and switches off all of their on-premises servers on Friday and just uses cloud services from Monday. Having access to an existing infrastructure is important in the short term and perhaps through to the medium and long term too. Note, he's allowed to access the Windows Server with his SPE license too. He's not just covered for the SharePoint server, or indeed the Exchange and Skype for Business servers, but Windows Server as well. As long as you've bought the server license, you've effectively got the CAL in the SPE license. But this organisation suddenly realised that they need to extend their on-premises SharePoint server farm. So they buy another physical server and they license it for Windows Server. Then they consider that this is likely to be a short-term SharePoint deployment because they really are committed to going to the cloud with SharePoint Online. So they're a bit hesitant about buying more SharePoint server licenses since they think they will only need them in the short term. What should they do? Well, there's good news for them. Included in the SPE USL are the rights to install Exchange, SharePoint and Skype for Business Server. Now, they can install the products as often as they like, downgrade to a previous version, and run the software in a physical or virtual infrastructure. There's just one main restriction. You can see that I've actually put on-premises servers on the slide. You couldn't use these rights to run Exchange server in a virtual machine on Azure or on shared hardware in a service provider server farm. And of course, the SPE USL that we bought for this man here allows him to access these servers too. As the final part of this slide, let's consider the lady we met earlier. Do you remember she had her nice shiny laptop we wanted to use? Well, we did buy her desktop platform licenses for it. Can you see I've assigned a traditional device license to the device? So this represents now an organisation who have licensed some of their users for SPE and some are still traditionally licensed. Let's just check which service the traditionally licensed lady is allowed to access. Can she access the traditionally licensed servers? Yes, of course. She has a Cal Suite license, so that's fine. What about the hosted servers? Well, no, there are no rights to the cloud within a traditional license, and I think actually both of those questions are straightforward. But what about the special servers? Actually, she isn't allowed to access those servers. It's only users who are licensed with SPE USLs that are allowed to access them. Here's the second special right I want to talk to you about. Note that this one only applies to the From SA USLs. Do you remember that with the From SA USL, you stop paying for your Office Professional Plus license and the Windows and Cal Suite too, and move to the single license for SPE? Well, there are customers who need to retain long-term the rights to install Office Professional Plus, as well as the 5 installations of Office 365 Pro Plus, and this is a right which is included with the From SA USLs. So the licensed user can install Office Professional Plus 2016 on a single device, but perhaps more importantly, he gets downgrade rights too. You probably know that with Office 365 Pro Plus, you're committed to using the latest versions, and organisations that still need to run, for example, Office 2010 will of course find this benefit very useful. Well, that brings us to the end of our session on the licensing of Secure Productive Enterprise. I hope you enjoyed the training and I wish you the very best of luck when you take the associated exam.